We're thrilled that Writer Spoke is going to be coming to ACMI. It's going to be in Federation Square from the 2nd to the 6th of March. Just to give you a little bit of a background about ACMI and what we do, I am going to assume that many of you have been to ACMI, but for those of you who haven't, we're the Museum for the Moving Image. We're located in Federation Square, so right in the centre of Melbourne. Last year, we undertook a major renewal project, and a key part of that was thinking about what our programs are and really opening up the moving image into a much more multidisciplinary, more experimental, I suppose, more expansive space. And we're thrilled to be able to invite Blast Theory to kind of be part of that new reinvention. So, Nick, to kick things off, I was wondering, for people like me and other people in the audience who haven't experienced Writer Spoke, can you talk us through what happens and what people should expect?
So it's pretty straightforward. If you have a bike, you bring a bike along to see us, or you can hire a bike from us, and then we put a smartphone on your handlebars. We give you a headset, and then we send you out into the city. And while you're out in the city, you're guided by a narrator, and she tells you about her life. But she invites you to reflect on your own life. And in the course of reflecting on your life, she asks you some questions, asks you to find places in the city to record your answers to those questions. Once you've recorded an answer to a question, she then reveals that you can hear recordings made by other people. And so you then can hear all the recordings made by however many other people who've been out cycling in the city, and hear what they've answered in reply to those questions. So it's kind of very simple in a way in its structure. It's not complicated in terms of the technology, at least not by today's standards. And its real focus is around a very sort of embodied experience of being in the city, but also an embodied experience of having time to reflect. It kind of came from an impetus that we felt there's a really a space when people are traveling, which is an imaginative space. We really wanted to kind of capture an opportunity there to turn that into an experience that was shareable and shared.
How long is the experience, or does it depend on?
Well, some people go cycling for miles. You know, some people they're keen cyclists and they'll go out all across the city. But it takes about an hour. But you can come back and you can make it as long as you like, I think, is the real answer. It asks you to come back after about 45 minutes to an hour.
When did you first do Writer Spoke, and where did that happen?
So it really started in 2007, which it was the year the iPhone came out. But it also was the year that Google bought YouTube. And at the time, the kind of the big phrase about the internet was user-generated content. And we were really kind of curious about what this would do and what kind of space this created. And one of the themes that we have in our work is really thinking about the role of the audience as being central in the making of the work, and being central in having a voice, and the kind of question of who has power to speak in any given situation is really kind of key. So for us, user-generated content was suggestive of a kind of revolution where we thought, well, this is going to be really exciting. But we were also really kind of aware of the kinds of content that was being published on YouTube at the time. You know, a lot of it is, and a lot of it still is, it was kind of quite facile in the first stages. It was kind of infantile. And we were kind of curious what kind of content we could encourage people to make and how we would encourage people to make that. And so Writer Spoke, in a way, was our attempt to make our own user-generated content platform. It was our own social media platform before really we really understood what social media was.
Where did it first happen?
So it's toured to now 20 cities. The first city, it started in London at the Barbican. Yep. It's toured to Copenhagen, to Athens, to Finland. It's come to Australia before, and it's been to Adelaide before.
Can you tell us about how Blast Theory devises a work and how you work together and the different, I'm interested in the different sort of skills and backgrounds and approaches that you bring together to make a work like this.
Yeah, so I guess we've been together for a long time. So we started in 1991, and we came from a very diverse set of practices. So I trained in sort of social theory of art. Matt, who's one of the other artists, studied English and was really sort of coming from a background of theatre and performance. And Ju was studied fine art. But I think what we all had in common when we kind of came to work together was really a sense of a kind of practice where we felt a real dissatisfaction about the nature of theatre and the kinds of spaces that theatre occupied in terms of where they kind of sat in terms of culture. And so for us, we really wanted to kind of sort of break out of the sense that theatre was buildings, that theatres were kind of rooms that you sat in and you watched stories. We wanted theatre to become a thing that you participated in, a thing that you felt witness of, a thing that you felt some kind of agency or sort of accountability, and that you were part of an event. And so the kind of key terms for us are kind of around kind of presence and agency, where for us, it really is around audiences having a kind of a sense of being present and they're bringing something of themselves to the work. And you'll see if you do Writer Spoke that really Writer Spoke is the stories of the people who take part in the work. It's not, we've prompted those stories to kind of be surfaced, but the work is really about the people that you listen to. The other thing is around technology. And I think one of the things that, traditionally technology has always been very technologically adventurous. But we thought, the way that technology has changed has really encouraged people to kind of think about culture outside of kind of large theatres or sort of black rooms, and really about thinking about technology as an enabler for different kinds of experience where, we're constantly sort of changing the ways that we consume media or we consume culture because of the ways that the platforms are changing or the hardware is changing, and our acceptance of those things is changing. And it's been a kind of sort of strange journey from 2007 when we first made Writer Spoke, and we were in that context teaching people to use touchscreens when we invited them to do the work, whereas now all of that is in the past, and that context has really changed. 2022 for Writer Spoke was it's in a way a quite different piece of work, even though not much has changed within the work.
Obviously people now know most people know how to use a touchscreen and an iPhone, but how do you think in that period of time people's relationship to that technology and therefore the way that they experience or engage Writer Spoke might have changed? And does that change in different places that you do it?
Yeah, I guess Writer Spoke does change quite a lot between cities. It's a lot to do with the kind of cycling culture or the cycling friendliness of the city on a practical level. But there's also things around, I think, cultural differences in how comfortable people feel about talking about themselves. And I think, but also over time, I think the technology has changed or people's relationship has changed. So in 2007, the idea that you stood in the middle of the city with a sort of touchscreen device and you spoke to it as if it was a person was somehow anomalous and quite an odd thing to do. Whereas these days we're really used to sort of talking to our sort of voice assistants or to automated services in ways that now kind of sort of speaking into the air is a sort of culturally accepted thing, that you kind of talk to space or you talk to technology. And so that's really changed. But also I think our sense of trust in social media and our trust in technology has changed. So I think whereas in 2007, people came to the work with a sort of, not exactly wonder, but at least a sort of naivety about data and use of data and how data was being recorded and what the implications might be. People come with a much sort of stronger sense of, an understanding of the complexity of what kind of lives out on the internet and what those spaces might entail.
Do you think that has that sense of trust or distrust, do you think that has influenced how people not only sort of think about it, but also what they're doing while they're experiencing Writer Spoke? As you listen to what people are doing, are they less honest, or are they trying to be more tricky, or?
I think the thing that's remarkable with Writer Spoke and is just how open people are, really. And I think one of the things that we really set out to do is to make a space that, or a kind of hybrid space, because it's digital and it's physical. It's kind of physically located, but it's also digitally facilitated. But a space that is really about trust. It's really about, people talk about connection, and people in the old days talked about Facebook connecting people, but that was just about a sort of technological link between people. It wasn't about creating trust between people. And I think what we've come to realize over the course of the debacle that is now Facebook, that we're all trying to sort of back away from, is that trust is a very complex thing to achieve. And Facebook is now in the process of completely re-engineering itself to try and remake trust. We're now in the process of trying to re-engineer trust into the internet through all sorts of mechanisms. And those things are actually much more transparent in physical relationships. And so in some way, Writer Spoke is not really a scalable work in many ways. It only works because we have a small number of people who come through. It's a very sort of gated, highly curated, highly moderated, and I think that's the kind of the thing that the kind of question that's kind of really come up in the course of the last sort of 13 years about digital spaces is, where do we actually find spaces where we can trust one another and we can share things with one another that kind of contribute to a kind of civic life and a sort of civic growth and a civic culture. And I think that's where I think Writer Spoke is still kind of relevant, even after sort of 15 years.
How has COVID impacted this? I mean, apart from the fact that you're not here and I'm not there, and we're not having, is this a work that in a way comes into its own in that environment, or have you thought much about that? And do you think about that in terms of projects that you're developing at the moment?
Yeah, we actually redeveloped the work in 2020 during the first lockdowns, because precisely on a practical level, thinking about COVID resilience and finding a work that would be resilient to the kind of conditions of the kind of lockdowns and the pandemic. But also, as kind of we moved through last year and people started coming out more, it also felt like it was an opportune time for people to really people to talk about their experience and their experience. So a lot of the recordings that were particularly made early on last year were people talking about their experience during lockdown and what it meant to sort of be reconnecting and just in the process of coming out and reconnecting with their family or reconnecting with their friends. And so all of those experiences have an opportunity to be sort of aired, which I think was opportune for that moment.
Do you think that people sort of reacquainting themselves with their city, do you think that it's, in a way, got a role in how people see that built environment and those communities, that having been away from it, it's sort of seeing it in new eyes?
Well, potentially. I feel like that, right, with, not to mention the M word, but I think the sort of with the sort of arrival of the metaverse, I think there is really a battle now between the sort of where our priorities lie in terms of like space. Obviously the metaverse has many qualities which make it fantastic and sort of exciting and elaborate, but there's physical space sort of is in danger of becoming like the backstage area for our digital sort of lives, and it becomes like the logistical area where we do all the sort of dirty business of real life in order to kind of get on with our perfect lives in digital spaces. And I think one of the lovely things about cities is that they're precisely vivid and dirty and full of sort of strange corners and the unexpected, and that topography of cities where you're surprised and you're shocked, but you're also like it's sort of mixed with sort of recognition. And one of the things I think Writer Spoke tries to do is kind of bring that sense of recognition of those kind of very human moments that we often have, or we all have, but are often very private, and bring those out into the city so that you're kind of confronted with precisely the kinds of spaces that have been created by digital infrastructure, where we wander the city and don't speak to anyone because we're all on our phones, or we don't need to speak to anyone, and we don't know what anyone's story is or what they're doing. But those are the places that are important, because those are kind of, I think physical space and urban space is precisely where we should be putting effort.
Given the technology that you're working with for Writer Spoke is now quite old, but seems perfect for what you're trying to do, what do you see as exciting happening in technology now? Are there things that you're looking at that you're thinking, I want to develop new works? How does that fit with the, I suppose, ideas you've got and the toys and tools you want to play with? Are there things that are particularly exciting whilst you're at the moment?
I do. We're currently on a sort of journey which has now been about 2 years of sort of developing work, sort of using sort of machine learning in different contexts, looking at sort of machine learning driven sort of dialogue and machine learning driven trust systems is what we've been looking at. And I think that feels like the wave, or the thing that's about to sort of fall. Well, I mean, we're all aware of sort of how AI is sort of being used to kind of predict our behavior. It's even sort of being used in sort of things like sentencing and sort of deciding who's sort of insurance valuations. It's kind of being used in the background in so many applications now. And I think for us, it's not really about the technology, it's about the kind of the social impact of it. And like for us, like there's always sort of great high resolution displays and all sorts of new things you can do with headsets, and those in themselves can be sort of fantastic and spectacular. But for us, our interest is really what's the implication in terms of its social impact, or how does it intervene in people's everyday life? And I think AI is the thing where it's kind of arriving in so many different layers, at so many different levels in people's everyday life. And we're trying to sort of find a path through to kind of talk about it. That's where our attention is at the moment.